All right, so I am working on a table. It's going to be a desktop that goes right here. So that's what we're going, this is our new addition. That's what we're going to be talking about in this video. We're still under construction here, but what I did was I measured from the wall out to where I wanted it to go. It's about 20 inches to where I wanted it to go. And then I measured from the cabinet all the way over there. We have a cabinet that's going to go up above here, so I figured out where that was going to end. And then that's where, and then I wanted to make sure that that register down there is going to get covered up. So from my cabinet to the register is about 78 inches, and then we'll just hang the cabinet directly above where the desktop ends. Other things to think about when you're making stuff like this. What kind of chairs are you going to be putting there? I'm not sure if this is the chair that we're going to put there or not. I just kind of set it here to make sure that 20 inches was good enough. Also, when you're making the height of your desk, you have to keep in mind like windows, where your trim is going to go to. All that kind of stuff. So all of these design elements are things to be thinking about when you are designing for your project. Okay, so I drew up my sketch last night just on a piece of notebook paper. Sketches do not have to be pretty. Sketches are sketches. Putting pencil to paper, getting your ideas out, and then we do a final draft, which is what I just did. The reason for final drafts is because sketches are not to scale. So you may have this image in your head that comes out on paper, but then when you actually scale it, it doesn't actually look like what you want it to look like. So that's why we do final drafts, so you can see what it looks like scaled. I'm gonna do an end grain top like this. So this is all end grain here. This is the face grain. Okay, so like when you guys put your cutting boards together, this is what it's going to look like. And this is what I'm going to go over today. I'm not going to go over the next part because that's just going to confuse you, but you do need to know what you're looking at. So what you're looking at here is my to scale drawing. And last night, what I decided was to make it easy on myself. All the strips that are going in there are going to be the same, but I'm just going to cut them and flip them over, which again is not going to make sense to you right now because I'm doing an end grain cutting board. I'm adding an extra step. You are just doing a regular cutting board with the face grain facing up. But what I did was I drew this out to scale to make sure that I liked the design. So I did alternating 2.5 and 1.5 inch pieces there. And essentially this is the same, these are the same pieces in each row. I would just flip it each time I wanted to make a new row. So, this is kind of what it's going to look like when it's done. I do like the design that I made. I am a little concerned when you do stuff like this. These lines don't always usually match up, but I'm just going to run it because that's the design I came up with, and I really just want to get going with this project. And I'm just going to try really hard to make those lines line up correctly when we get to gluing. So like what I'm talking about is you can kind of see right here, this was supposed to line up completely. It didn't exactly do that. The wood that I'm going to choose to do on my end grain cutting board is cherry, which is this right here. I'm only doing cherry because I don't want this kind of variation color in my kitchen. I want it to look pretty similar. I chose cherry because the flooring in our kitchen, the flooring in our living room is going to kind of match it. So it'll be like a nice transition from living room to kitchen because the flooring in our kitchen is gray, as you saw last night. So these are just all things that you need to think about when you're designing, not only your cutting board right now, but things that you need to think about for the future when you are designing something else that goes in your room or your living room or when you go off to college. Now we're going to talk about picking your wood out. And this sheet should look familiar to you guys. You all had to fill this out for your cutting board. We're just going to focus on this part here with some crazy mathematical skills for how I had to do it for the end grain cutting board. I figured out that I needed 10 pieces of cherry. I put 1 inch thick because I just want it to be as thick as possible. So I'm gonna run it through the planer until they're all the same size. And then whatever my thickness is what my thickness is. Remember I said for you guys, you're gonna want somewhere between 3/4 and 1 inch. My width for the first 10 pieces is 2.5. That's how I got that alternating pattern there, because one piece is 2.5, the other is 1.5. And I decided that they're going to be 70 inches long. The next set is going to be 10 pieces of cherry, 1 inch thick, 1.5 by 70. Okay, so you guys should have this all written out before you start picking out wood for your cutting board. So you guys are going to pick out wood from the wood storage area first, where we keep our cutoffs. If there's nothing in there that's long enough, you're going to come back here to where we keep all our full length pieces of wood. Because I'm doing such a long one, I had to take my cherry from up here. Okay, so we've got cherry up there. There's some pine up there. And a lot of this is oak. Maple down on the bottom. More pine in the middle there. And then way down here we've got walnut. Okay, so just kind of so you remember where all the wood pieces are, but remember to take from the wood storage area first. So I've got my boards picked out here, and I have enough for 10 of each of the widths of my board. I did all that figuring. When you're picking boards out, okay, I kind of just went from whatever was on top because that was easiest. But, you know, you might want to look for things that have like this cool wood grain characteristic here. Maybe you're not using your cutting board as a cutting board, so maybe you want knots in there like this. This is not very good for cutting boards. However, I did figure out that I could get like a 1.5 inch strip out of here, and it was on top, so I grabbed it. So this is all stuff to consider when you're picking out your wood. Characteristics, and is it going to be feasible to use as a cutting board, or is there going to be too many knots in it and like other kind of characteristics that usually come with wood in there. So I'm going to go through the squaring up my boards process now. I'm going to do all 10 at one time. That way they all come out of the planer the same thickness. And then I'll bring them all over to the jointer and I'll square up one edge. And then I'm going to bring them all over to the table saw and I'll cut the boards that I want at 2.5, and then I'll cut the boards that I want at 1.5. And then I will be ready for gluing. And I forgot one small little detail. Because these boards are so long, some of them are like 120 inches long, I only want 70 inches. So I'm going to bring it over before I do any of the process for squaring up my board. I'm going to bring it over to the miter saw first and cut it down to like 72-ish so that I have a little extra. That way you're not working with such long boards, and the thickness and everything else stays the same for whoever the next person is that wants to use it. And then when I'm like the excess that I'm going to cut off, I'm going to go put in the cutoff room so that somebody else can use it later on.